All right, sweet. All right, so back quickly, who I am. So I do two things today. I'm wearing my FinOps Foundation hat, but normally I am at Cloud Health working on our cloud cost management platform. I've been there for 8 years. So been thinking about FinOps, doing this thing, working with customers for quite a while. In terms of what we're going to talk about today, was thinking we'd do an intro to FinOps, show you guys what the FinOps Foundation is, kind of explain it. I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities for us to align, because one of the things I do is I'm the meetup organizer, or one of them, for the FinOps Foundation Salt Lake meetup. And we get like 30 plus people at our meetups. So I'm looking to connect that community with this community and the AWS meetup community. So start to be like, you're going to hear from me. So get used to it. So what is FinOps? Let me see, this slide isn't progressing. Here we go. So one thing that is often misunderstood is people hear FinOps and they think it's financial operations. And you talk about OpenAI, they are not helping us, because OpenAI calls FinOps finance and operations. So if you were to ever write anything from there, it would say that, but it is not. Finance is the combination, or FinOps is the combination of finance and DevOps. And it's really important, because really where FinOps can start to sing is when you really connect further with the engineering persona than the operations persona. That's really where you can show the value, is connecting finance and the engineering side. The other thing about FinOps is it's a cultural practice. Like we say, FinOps is life. There's so many aspects to it, and there's things I'll say you might be like, duh, but so often these things just get overlooked. And what FinOps is really about is creating these conversations with these different stakeholders to really to open up the communication so that it is happening consistently, instead of once a year at budgeting, once a year at project kickoff, when you do an analysis of how much you think it'll cost. The goal is to have FinOps is something that is in your engineers' minds as they're writing code. And then, so as I mentioned, it's these FinOps is about bridging these different groups. So finance, product, procurement, that's huge, is now connecting so much of FinOps in these cost challenges is around licensing. Some organizations manage licensing outside of their cloud bills. Some manage licensing within it, and they launch resources and they don't bring your own license. So these are all of the types of conversations that FinOps is about opening up and supporting with these different personas. If I say anything at any point, would love for this to be interactive. I am going to probably call on some people or call on the group, and Troy is going to have to be the czar in the room. Would love to hear feedback and kind of gauge where you're all at with this stuff. Yep. So it kind of goes that cultural aspect. It's an operational framework. And I think that first thing is the most important thing. FinOps is not about saving money. It's about making money. And it's about maximizing the value of each dollar you spend in the cloud. There's a term called unit economics. And if you look at a startup spend, their cloud spend, it better be growing fast, because if it's not, you got something going on. You need to be having fast customer growth. But that may not be a true indicator of your customer growth. So what you want to do is you have these things in FinOps called unit economics, where you look at your cloud spend is growing up by 50% each month. But if you're doubling, 100% increasing your customer base each month, your actually cost per customer is going down. You've created an application that scales well with customers and doesn't become less efficient as customer base increases. The other thing that FinOps is really about is the timely driving decisions based on real-time data. So there's a book, the FinOps Foundation released a book, and it talks a lot about this, and it relates the analogy to electric cars. And any car that gives you gas mileage as you press the gas. companies saw that people became more efficient with cars by having the real-time data you were doing well or not with your energy consumption. And you would, the more frequent you have that data, the more you're going to be able to react to it. If you get a report at the end of your drive that says, hey, you were this efficient for this, that's kind of helpful. If you get it a week later, it's probably not helpful. If you get it a year later, it's definitely not helpful. So FinOps is about trying to understand what decisions you make and being able to get that data to the engineer or the decision maker as soon as possible. And then lastly, it's around financial accountability. This is something, if any of you are working in the OpEx model and, the CapEx model, and had data centers and had to deal, and their engineers didn't have financial accountability because we already had 10,000 cores. Whether you use 50 or 60 doesn't matter. They're sitting there being used. That's not the way cloud works. You pay for what you use for the most part. So this is another really big cultural change, especially for organizations with a really established on-prem infrastructure and chargeback model, to now change the way engineers think about this. So maybe, like, I've been talking for a while, maybe open it up to the team, to the people here. Any of this kind of resonate with you? Any going from that CapEx to OpEx model and struggling to create financial accountability? Absolutely. So it's unit economics is the topic of that. And so we see organizations really trying to start with a really humble metric. So one of those may be number of page visits. That's something you totally know per day, number of page visits. You also know, hopefully, what your cost is per application. If you're not, that's definitely step one. You need to know your cost per application. But you start with a humble metric, page clicks, logins, something like that. You start to track that over time, and then you can start to get a little bit more mature and maybe bring in other types of costs that aren't just cloud divided by one static number. Absolutely. And as companies repatriate and move workloads back on-prem and have 50% of their workloads on-prem and 50% in the cloud, and these applications are moving back and forth, you have to have one single accountability structure and accounting structure to be able to support OpEx and CapEx. Cool. Yeah. All right. So next one. So I kind of mentioned this, just who does FinOps. I think really just doubling down on this FinOps practitioner being that connection. One thing I did want to mention before, leadership. So if any of you are trying to launch a FinOps program at your company, trying to build awareness, one of the most important steps is leadership buy-in, because you're now asking people to do things that they don't care about and are not aligned with their quarterly OKRs. And you need to be able to create visibility with a bought-in leader. So one of the ways, like, here's a way that we know I've seen companies do it. Their CTO is their FinOps executive champion. Every week, their CTO gets an email of all the accomplishments and the great things the FinOps team has done. So every week, even if the CTO may not read it, the CTO, this is going up. It shows engineers at a lower level that they have leadership buy-in, and it encourages others and see what types of actions. So that visibility communication up to leadership, you can get a lot of leverage with that channel. All right. Now, I keep talking about this word FinOps. Now, what is the FinOps Foundation? So FinOps Foundation started, I don't know, 5-ish years ago and has grown. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's over 16,000 practitioners. And the metric that I think is so interesting is 48 of the Fortune 50 companies are members, which you don't just like have somebody sign it. These are companies that are paying the FinOps Foundation for access to material and people. I don't know, but what I am going to do is I'm going to hit this slide. Now it doesn't have all of them, but they do have a list that you can go to that has all the member organizations. I should probably know what that is. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. But so the big thing that's happened in the last 3 months, GCP was first. Azure got in about a year ago, and then AWS just joined within the last 6 months. Really, really big statement. And we've seen very big adoption across these CSPs, with being involved in the foundation, to talking about FinOps, to actually releasing features that are output from the FinOps Foundation. So for anybody here, highly suggest, if you're a practitioner at a company, your company does not have to be a member. You can just join the foundation. There's a Slack community. There are tons of materials that we release. We have like these workbooks that we create. Oh, that's not it, but there's one in there. Workbooks that a lot of the material I'm presenting today is from, where it's a bunch of FinOps nerds like myself trying to define the industry. So these are member organizations, the big three, and OCI and Tencent. So really good coverage. I know they're in talks with Ali, but they haven't been able to close through. All of these platforms, Tanzu Cloud Health, that's where I work. No big deal. We were the first premier member. Humble brag. But that is the FinOps Foundation. And you also don't even have to join the FinOps Foundation. So architect. So we have all of these. Everybody has access to these. So this is a whole playbook on and I'm teasing this because this is what a lot of my presentation is based on, is architecting VM-based applications for cost efficiency. So it goes through, talks about all the different ways. I'm going to be showing this image. Stop looking at it. And why that you would think about optimizing, which I think is going to be really interesting for this group, because this isn't FinOps. Knowing when to do auto scaling groups, when to use containers, when to do NoSQL versus MySQL. Like, these are decisions that all of you have been making every day of your life. It's just adding this kind of FinOps layer to it, and how to think about customer use cases in the context of cost when you design these things. So two other topics of the FinOps Foundation. This is their annual conference. It's in San Diego. There is no conference that is more valuable if FinOps is your priority than this. I've done reInvent 10 times. My Ignite, Google Next, nothing compares to this. So if anybody's looking to really make some advancements in their knowledge and networking, this is a great place to do it. And it's in San Diego. All right. And then the other thing the FinOps Foundation produces, which is super interesting, is the state of FinOps. So all of this is available to everybody at data.finops.org. I'm only going to pull out a couple of the results from this year. But one of the big questions on this report every year is, what are the key priorities for you as a practitioner, for your organization coming into this year? And this will be the fourth time they're doing it. The first three, it was empowering engineers to take action as the number one item. And then this year, it shifted down drastically. So I'd like to open it up to this group. Which of these, do any of these ring bells for you? So for the folks on the line, by the way, I'm going to be repeating, parroting what comes from the group in the room. The first reaction after asking which of these hit home, reducing waste or unused resources, was the first one that came to mind. Anything else come up for you guys in the room? Like, what's automation like at your organization? Are people implementing automation of anything, everything? So you were using my product. SHI is the main resell. Our product is the one that they resell. We're the VMware multi-cloud cost tool. So yeah, sounds like it didn't go so well. But for the folks on the line, works at the state of Utah, and multi-cloud cost reporting was a big challenge for them. So I think the unit economics, so, okay, I'm repeating for the folks on the line. how to justify investments in cloud technologies versus engineering, headcount, labor, time investments. Is that kind of a fair categorization? I would probably say all of the above. I think organizations really struggle with proving that this isn't just a cost cleanup exercise that is done in 3 or 6 months. And that's really where leadership, like, we try to tell people to start small, get wins, and create visibility. So, but I think it's all of the above that you're saying in terms of getting leadership buy-in. And it's also one of the other things too is not every organization has a leadership person that cares about or understands cloud cost, understands that. Maybe it's a very on-prem heavy organization. Maybe their CTO is not is a really engineering kind of person. And guess what? Engineers don't care as much about cost. So that also could be the leadership that you have access to isn't aligned with the FinOps priorities. It's harder to tell that story. All right. So before I move on, any last thoughts? All right. Last piece of data. Oh, where did it show? Well, I know it's right here. So the last thing I was going to show is this, right? Oh, no, never mind. No, it's in the last slide. All right. So some things in FinOps, these capabilities. So I'm going to go through these pretty fast because I want to get into the next section. But to kind of think about how we'll go through these. So first, you need to understand your cost and usage. And you need to establish things like tagging to be able to allocate your costs. You need to be able to understand what types of shared costs you have and how to allocate them. So a shared cost could be something like support. It could be something like so it's something that isn't a resource, or it could be a resource. Like you have a storage bucket with 5 applications. Hopefully you don't, but you could have one, a shared resource that 5 applications write their data to. And now you need to charge back that one resource that's shared across multiple applications. So it's really about kind of drilling into that level of ownership at the application business unit owner level, and not just inclusive of just resources. Next, so you understand your cloud usage, and although all of these things should be happening at the same time. This isn't a step 1 through 6. So just being clear. Next one is unit economics. I've talked about that, is understanding organizational KPIs. What are you trying to track? Now that you understand your cost per application and your business unit cost, what is it? How do you know if they're doing well? How do you know if the application is scaling correctly? So this is when you now start to tie in the context to say, is my growing cloud cost a good thing? Forecasting and budgeting, also very critical. This is something that historically was done once a year, maybe every couple of years in a CapEx model where you're not buying hardware as often. In FinOps, the goal of FinOps is to have this be at least quarterly. Hopefully you have something like a monthly meeting with stakeholders. So if stuff hits the fan, people are made aware early and they're not about to have a cloud shock bill. It goes back to that Prius electric and miles per gallon, understanding if you can share as you're approaching your breaking budget versus, hey guys, we just broke budget, instead of letting them know 4 months sooner, easier conversation. Now, before we get into making money, so hinting to this, so the real-time decision-making, what I was just talking about, really where it becomes important is anomalies. Anybody here, and if not, it's okay, you don't have to say no, but hopefully the answer is yes, looking at anomalies, whether they're in the Azure console, using some sort of tool, anyone doing that? Cost anomalies. All right, now let's talk about saving money. So first is cloud rate optimization, buying RIs. We just call it in the FinOps Foundation rate optimization. So For all those like 26 services Azure supports for reservable services, this is buying 1 or 3 year commitments and get to for a discounted rate on demand. Highly suggest everybody, this is where you can launch a FinOps program and prove the value from a cost savings perspective. Now, I said FinOps is not about saving money, it's about making money. It's really hard to prove that. It's not that hard to prove you saved money. So if you're an organization trying to FinOps, or you're trying to prove, hey guys, we should do this, purchasing reserved instances is a really good area to do that, because a lot of times companies are buying them for VMs, but you're not buying it for Databricks. You're not buying it for MySQL. You're not buying it for insert X service. So Azure has the best coverage of all cloud providers in terms of breadth in services, and they're often underutilized. So for the group, think about it. The next way that we optimize is usage optimization. So this is saving money, optimizing running resources. So leveraging things like auto-scaling groups, right-sizing resources that are underutilized, leveraging lights on, lights off policies, things like that. Optimizing your usage of running resources. And the last one is around, can I click there? Oh, I can't do that. The last one is organizational aligned. Oh, sorry, someone saying something? Oh, okay. So last one, establishing a FinOps culture. I think that's like the most important thing to start with across all of these. The chargeback and finance integration, we're now starting to talk about this concept of intersecting frameworks. The most commonly intersected frameworks would be around ITFM, TBM, like really getting into SaaS and license ownership and license management. We see a lot of alignment between these things, especially because a lot of FinOps is working with procurement. So, and this concept of intersecting framework, one of my slides coming up, sustainability used to be an intersecting framework, and it will be very soon. It's the TAC will vote on it, and I'm expecting it to pass. Cloud sustainability will now be one of these capabilities under here instead of an intersecting framework. Anybody in the room care, like, not them personally, but does their business care about sustainability, carbon reporting, energy consumption, anything like that? All right, now let's talk about architecting. So the first slide we have will lead into, or after this one, will lead into the question around KPIs. So this is from the FinOps Foundation website and sourced from here. Really interesting metric. 70% of costs are determined at the concept and architecture phase. So this is when me and us PMs communicated customer use case, engineers and architects heard those words and created a design. We're not shipping code. We're not running resources. We're just writing requirements and creating designs. And 70% of costs are determined at that concept stage. So the goal is to shift this conversation left before resources are deployed. We don't optimize. We deploy optimized. And this right now, architecting for cloud is actually not listed as a capability, but last slide I was on, but it is being added in this new update of capabilities. And one thing that is really interesting that they did is these other workbooks I showed, you'll know we call it architecting for cost efficiency. This is architecting for cloud because organizations have different KPIs and different things they care about and different metrics they're held accountable to. And our goal is that you architect with those things in mind. Cost to your organization this year may not be the most important thing. It's customer growth. So that's what I'm talking about here. So the first step is figuring out, do you care about revenue? Do you care about carbon? Is the most important thing to your organization SLAs and 9 9s and 11 9s, whatever, 75 9s? Do you guys care about energy? We actually have one customer that in the EU, they're really focusing on energy consumption across the organization. That's the metric they're being held accountable to. Maybe it's user growth. You don't care about if you're making money. You don't care about carbon. You just need more people logging into this platform. That's your strategy. So this is really where it fundamentally goes back to, instead of architecting for cost, it's really about architecting for cloud and defining in step one those organizational KPIs. Step two, we need, and this is PMs, if any of you are PMs, either do this or hold your PMs accountable. You need to communicate customer requirements so that engineers can design this with the right to meet the KPIs. If I know that this is a cyclical workload based on seasons, I got to tell my engineers that, because if they ship this feature out today, right here, they're going to have no idea that that usage is about to quadruple. And vice versa, if they launch right here and they run resources this long, they're like, I need to buy reserved instances. And they buy reserved instances, and then usage drops drastically. So it's absolutely critical before an application can be designed that the product manager communicates the utilization of that feature or application. We also have to talk about and understand the feature rollout. So this is something that we really were bit in the hiney at Cloud Health for. And last year, this is starting last year, we have to, on every requirements document, provide what the feature rollout experience and SLAs are. Because if I onboard a customer and they need 13 months of data immediately for this to be usable, that needs to be included in onboarding. But if I onboard a customer and really all that matters is the first month, and then the last 13 months we can slow roll this in, engineers can design and architect for the KPI in mind with this rollout. Customer profile. Are you working? Is this feature for huge customers or small customers? Is this for companies that have really strict financial reporting needs on this feature, where this is a feature for charging back? Need to be right. But if this is a feature for cost estimation of resources that haven't been launched, there's an opportunity to be able to have not fully accuracy. And that's the customer profile and persona will show you that. And then lastly, security and data residency. This is really where it's going to start getting into other areas where future slides, where can this data leave the EU? Does this data have to stay in GovCloud? These are the kinds of questions that you need to be able to communicate before an application is designed, because actually, I think it's going to be 2 slides next. But anyway, what I'll finish saying, because not everything is available in all regions. You mentioned whatever Azure service that was, and I'm not familiar with it. That's probably not available in every single region, unless it's a multi-regional thing, which I picked a bad example. But not every Azure service or every cloud provider service is available with the same level of SLAs in every single region for the same price. So you need to really understand customer use cases from a region perspective in terms of how to, and then the other reason it's important, think about customer experience and SLAs. If 99% of your users are in the US and you put your application in the EU, not a great user experience. So understanding your user profile and company profile. Now we can kind of move on. My PM job's done. Architects taking over. This is where we get into the question that was brought up around employee expertise. I say I need to launch this project, but I'm going to need 2 DevOps engineers for the first 6 months of that. And once we roll this out, I'm going to need a DevOps engineer that knows how to use Azure X service in this language. maybe you do not have the employee expertise at your organization to architect it the way that you want. So you need to take that into account. Availability of licenses, bring your own data. I mean, bring your own license or not. Maybe your company has a ton of unused Microsoft licenses. There's a lot of opportunity there to take advantage of. You also could have organizational design patterns. Maybe you cannot use NoSQL for some reason. I don't know. There are different things that you have in your internal company that you always have to put data through 2 regions, or insert unique use case that companies think of. So this is a really important step before you deploy an application, to understand what your limitations and opportunities are at an organizational level. And then the other thing is you need to think about the CSP. So region availability, regional SLAs, need to understand what is available within that cloud provider. Service availability. I will say I'm not as big of an Azure nerd as I am AWS and GCP, but I would think this is a problem in those like it is the others. Not all services are available in all regions. And some of them are like pretty important services that haven't been launched in new regions. So you should always look, once you understand what region you want to use, are the services that you want to use available? And on the flip side, we just went through an exercise at Cloud Health where we need to support multi-regions. One of those challenges is not all services are available in all regions. So we had to pick services and technologies that were available in the greatest breadth of regions relative to our customer base. So these are really, in us having to go back and do that now after the application was deployed has not been a lot of fun. And I highly do not suggest ripping out services to create multi-regional applications. And then the last one on here, different cloud providers and have different SLAs and support contracts. Maybe you have both cloud providers, you run AWS and GCP, but you have a super beefy AWS support contract that you can hold out SLAs to. And so for a production application, you need to use those. But if this is a development application and you don't need those crazy SLAs, you can now maybe run that workload in the other cloud provider. So this is really that last step before you architect, is you've really made all the decisions on your technology, your requirements. Now, is this going to fit? Which cloud provider does this fit into? Okay, cool. All right, and then I think I got like 1 or 2. So this is, I wanted to talk about this, the sustainability change. So this is one of the biggest results, I think, of the FinOps, state of FinOps. So this right here is just one of the questions that less than 20% of teams are talking with sustainability teams reporting on this feel accountable. But they're expecting by the end of next year that 50% of them are expecting by the end of next year to be working with these types of personas. So I think that right there is going to introduce a lot of pressure on the FinOps person to speak sustainability, to work with these stakeholders, and vice versa. So the sustainability team is now going to have to accommodate cloud data, which one of the big issues is, my next point is, they're just beginning to report this carbon energy consumption. GCP does a great job of it. Azure makes it available in some areas. AWS does not do a good job of it. So it's really something that if companies are trying to now start to use this data, we need the CSPs to increase what they're providing. We have a I mentioned the energy one. They are launching all development applications in the region that has the best energy consumption. So that is their priority. My dog just got into my place. If people are hearing it, I'll try to mute out, but that's the background. Sorry. I think the next one is really the most, sustainability nerds did not like Vogel's speech around sustainability at reInvent, where he said that cost is a proxy for sustainability. And although fundamentally decreasing your costs and wasted resources is a sustainable act, it's not a one-to-one. We see a lot of regions having polarizing to sustainability to cost. This region is more sustainable and a higher cost. So these are all over the place where organizations now need to think about what is the metric they're going against, and these are at odds. And this last point to the regional placement is very critical because so many regions are so different and time of year. So all the CSPs that do provide regional data take into account seasonality. It's hotter in whatever region in the summer and takes more energy to cool data centers down. So that is one of the things that's really powerful across all three providers. And it's something that that I know people are talking about. I have heard no examples of organizations moving applications across regions based on seasonality. That's a big step. All right. And that's all I got. Yeah, like 50 or 40 minutes? No, 50. That's what you're looking for. Yeah. Theory, the data is available. And if you had strict requirements that the most important thing to you is sustainability, organizations would do that. And also to give more, she said a VM is a VM is a VM for sure. But where it becomes different is what that energy is generated from. So places that have nuclear energy, super clean, versus places that have coal, not sustainable in any way. So that's really where it becomes most important. And then the other side is a hot VM versus a idle VM require different energy consumption. So I do know GCP does take into account performance metrics at the resource level in their export, which is huge. And by the way, quick plug, if anybody, I geek out, like this is my job. Just during the day working and geeking out with non-Cloud Health customers to help move the foundation and other people forward. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm always down to just have a geek out session. The big thing with the FinOps Foundation is you are not allowed to pitch product or be salesy in any way. I know how to not do that, so no pressure. Don't think that in any way, shape, or form I'm going to be pulling up the platform and trying to pitch to you. So by the way, for those it's super interesting. So I want to make sure people know what you just said. So in the EU, data center built very green, sustainability-wise. One of the technologies in it opened when a weather storm came in, negatively impacted their technology. They had to go back and not be as green because that was the priority, is availability, accuracy, data. That's the top. That is, I would say it's the top priority, with sustainability being the secondary one. Is that a fair summarization?